Hello, egoproctor here. This is my website, egoproctor.simple.com, just to show you some of the research. And I've got a bunch of books, finally, here and a place to do some stuff. So, 13,000 years ago, there is discussion of evidence that 13,000 years ago, a solar flare caused the Pleistocene mass extinction. Woolly mammoths, right? We're thinking about the woolly mammoth. This is evidence that essentially sinks Graham Hancock's theory of a comet and a flood. Just destroys it. Lets me wad it up into a ball and stick it in his butt. Okay. The reason why we can say that is because Anthony Peratt was studying high-energy plasma discharges for the U.S. Department of Energy at Los Alamos, and he discovered through dealings with David Talbot that these high-energy plasma discharges that he was recording in the lab while researching at Los Alamos were carved on rock all over the world. Okay. So what we have is Dr. Robert Schoch, Forgotten Civilization, the role of solar outbursts in our past and future. And so he even goes and he shows him in various places around the world. There's Göbekli Tepe, right, I think is in here as well, where he was another site that dates to the solar flares. And he shows a lot of evidence from around the world of cultures that were functioning. And then he gets into Peratt's work. Right? So then he shows Peratt's work, and the light is crappy here. Let's see. There we go. So, and then he discusses how it applies to his, right? So the bird-headed sculptures and other things. And so he describes how it relates to his theory and evidence of the Sphinx being however old it is. Right? Now these things have been traveled hard. Okay. Riding a bicycle across Texas carrying books in my saddlebag. So the Sphinx was being built before the solar outbursts. The original foundation and what was being or the pot, the bottom section was being carved out of the bedrock. And then the solar flares hit, and people went underground and they hid. And this thing lasted maybe 1,000 years or something. And so, and the planet burnt, and then it kind of grew back slowly. So, what we have is the next book, I guess, would be over here, this stack of books. It's called, it's a 4-part series called Traditional Cosmology. And in these books, Marinus Anthony van der Sloos documents, as he traveled the world with Anthony Peratt, he documents the congruence of global mythology around this event, right? So he's talking about the column and what people are talking about in ancient Egypt and Assyria about what this tree of life mythology was. And it wasn't that short little section that they talk about in Genesis. It was this massive thing that lasted like 1,000 years, and people started making oral traditions about it to remember what this thing was, and they were globally similar. Different experiences because there were different electrical discharges in different places around the world, but they were all essentially telling the same story. Okay. Which then brings us here to the mythic past. And so, Thomas L. Thompson takes us through, first, a quick introduction into how stories talk about the past, why he got into this work, and what happened to him, and then he gets into ideas about when you're using a text to generate a history and you're not using anything from the contemporary world to create that history. All right, so what we've got is, then he gets into discussions of conflicts between the archaeology and the stories in the Bible, that the stories in the Bible only have a Hellenistic viewpoint. They don't really talk from somebody in the ancient past, in ancient Egypt. It's not that culture they're referencing. That's not the audience they're writing for either. So neither the audience nor the authors of the Bible were in Egypt, and they're not talking about stories that came from Egypt or Samaria, Babylon, any of that. That's